You keep trying to negotiate with math, like math is a person you can charm, like the calendar gives a damn about your inner storyline, like the outcome is going to pity you because you had a rough week, and that's the first lie to delete from your systems because it's the root exploit that keeps getting you owned. You're not complicated. You're predictable. You're a pattern, and patterns are measurable, and yours is trash when it counts. You show up when it's easy, vanish when it's boring, and then act surprised when the results look exactly like your behavior. Stop acting like you're some mysterious exception to cause and effect, because you're not. You're just another soft human running the same cheap script. Chasing comfort like it's oxygen and calling it self-care to make it sound less pathetic. You don't need inspiration, you need a leash. And the leash is numbers because your feelings are noisy and unreliable, and your habits are the only truthful witness in this whole case. Pull up the ledger, not the fantasies. There are 24 hours in a day, 168 in a week. And even if you sleep 8 a night, that's 56 gone, leaving 112. And you want to sit there with a straight face and tell me you can't carve out 10 to 14 of those hours for the thing you keep claiming you want. Like you're too busy. Like your life is some emergency room when most of that time is just you bleeding minutes into distractions because you're addicted to the easiest dopamine on the shelf. You're not unlucky. You're undisciplined. And undisciplined is just a polite word for you letting the lowest impulse vote on every decision. And the lowest impulse always votes for short-term relief, which is why your weeks look the same, your months look the same, your years look the same, just with different excuses painted on top like a cheap reskin. You keep saying you'll start when you're ready, as if readiness is a prerequisite instead of a byproduct. As if progress waits for your mood to show up dressed nicely. It doesn't. It never has. And you know it because the only times you've ever made real traction were the times you moved without permission from your comfort. The times you did it while it felt dull, while it felt heavy, while it felt like nothing was happening and you still did it. And that's the point. The work is not a vibe. It's a requirement. And you either pay it daily or you pay it later with interest. And the interest is brutal because the world compounds whether you participate or not. Run the time math you keep dodging. If you do 90 minutes of real focused work a day, that's 10.5 hours a week. About 45 hours a month, roughly 540 hours in a year. 540 hours is not luck. That's construction. Now compare it to your current routine of half trying, where you do 20 minutes here, 0 minutes there, 2 decent days, followed by 5 days of scrolling and telling yourself you're tired. That's not a schedule. That's a slot machine. And you're pulling the lever, hoping it spits out a life. This is where you stop pretending you don't understand probability. Consistency is a multiplier, and flakiness is a destroyer. If you only execute when it's convenient, you've basically capped your success odds at the same sad percentage as your convenience rate. And your convenience rate is low because you keep manufacturing obstacles. Tiny ones, stupid ones. The kind that only work because you never challenge them. You act like the smallest resistance is a wall. Like the first hint of boredom is a crisis. Like the first friction means you should pivot. And that's because you trained yourself to treat discomfort as a stop sign instead of a speed bump. You're not fragile. You're just addicted to immediate relief. And every time you obey that impulse, you reinforce the loop. Cue, craving, click, numb, repeat. You did that so many times it became default. And now you call it personality, which is hilarious in the worst way because it means you've outsourced your identity to whatever keeps you most comfortable. And don't give me the performance about high standards, because your standards are not high. Your standards are imaginary. High standards would show up in your behavior, not in the speech you give yourself to feel superior while you do nothing. The truth is ugly and simple. Your output is the only honest resume you have. And right now, your output says lazy, predictable, soft, easily distracted, easily pleased, easily derailed. You want to be taken seriously while you keep treating your own commitments like optional suggestions. You want results that belong to someone who trains daily, but you keep living like someone who trains occasionally. And that mismatch is not tragic. It's stupid. You can't outthink that gap. You can't vibe your way through it. You can't manifest your way around it. You close it with repetitions, with boring, unglamorous reps, because reps are how systems change. You keep waiting for the big turning point, the dramatic switch, the perfect morning where you wake up and suddenly become relentless. And that's childish. Adults build switches with routines. Adults don't wait for motivation because motivation has garbage up time. It's like relying on a flaky server and then acting shocked when it goes down. Your discipline is the stable infrastructure, and you haven't built it because you keep trying to run the whole operation off willpower like a clown running a data center on a battery. Willpower is finite. Systems are durable. Stop romanticizing struggle and start engineering behavior. You want to talk like a hacker, then act like one. Identify the vulnerability, patch it, monitor it, and assume the attacker is you at your weakest because it is. Your weak self is not some separate creature. It's you. When you're bored, you when you're tired, you when you think nobody's watching and nobody is watching. That's the whole point. Which is why you keep getting away with your own. You would never tolerate this level of inconsistency from someone you paid. But you tolerate it from yourself because the consequences are delayed. And your brain loves delayed consequences because delayed means ignorable. So make the consequences immediate with structure. You don't need to feel anything. You need to obey the plan like it's non-negotiable, because negotiation is where you lose. Every time you bargain, you slip, and you know you slip because your bargaining phrases are always the same. Just this once. Just today. I'll do it later. I'll make up for it tomorrow. Those are not thoughts. Those are malware. They're designed to get you to click yes on your own sabotage, and you keep clicking yes like an obedient idiot. So Let's prosecute it. How many times have you said tomorrow in the last year? If tomorrow was a currency, you'd be rich. If tomorrow was a result, you'd already have the life you want. But tomorrow is just a hiding place for people who can't tolerate the present without sedation. And your sedation is distraction. And your distraction is endless because the world will supply it 24/7. The feed never ends. The noise never ends. The cheap pleasure never ends. And if you don't set boundaries, you will drown in it while telling yourself you're just taking a break. Breaks are planned and contained. What you do is avoidance disguised as rest. And it's not even good rest. It's restless consumption that leaves you duller than before. You call it unwinding, but you're not winding down. You're winding tighter because your attention gets shredded into smaller and smaller pieces, and then you act confused when you can't focus. You trained your mind like a dog to chase every stimulus, and now you expect it to sit still and do hard work on command. That's not how training works. You get what you practice. You practice distraction. You get distraction. You practice excuses. You get excuses. You practice showing up. You get progress. This isn't spiritual, it's mechanical. And the mechanical part is the most insulting because it means there's no mystery to hide behind. You can't claim special suffering. You can't claim special destiny. You are what you repeat. Take your week and audit it like evidence. How many hours did you actually produce something that would still matter in a year? Not consume, not plan, not fantasize, not reorganize, not research for the 10th time. Produce. The number is probably embarrassing and good. Let it be embarrassing, because embarrassment is data that your story doesn't match your behavior. And behavior wins. Behavior always wins. You can talk about your potential until your throat is dry, and it won't move a single metric. You want to weaponize logic. So here it is. If you want a different outcome, you need a different distribution of time and effort. Outcomes are distributions, not wishes. You don't get a new life from one heroic day. You get it from thousands of boring, correct decisions. So stop craving intensity and start craving repeatability. Intensity is easy to cosplay. Repeatability is where the frauds get exposed. And you've been frauding yourself, calling yourself disciplined because you did 2 hard days. Like 2 hard days cancels months of soft living. It doesn't. 2 hard days is noise. The signal is the average across weeks. Your average is what you are. And if your average is weak, then you're weak in practice, regardless of what you think you are in theory. Accept that not as a pity party, but as a starting measurement. A system can't be fixed without a baseline. Your baseline is inconsistency. Your baseline is procrastination. Your baseline is dopamine chasing. Your baseline is doing the minimum that avoids guilt and calling it a win. You want to stop feeling like you're always behind. Then stop behaving like someone who is always behind, because being behind is a lifestyle, not an accident. It's the natural output of postponing the important for the easy over and over, until the important becomes urgent, and then you panic and call it hustle. Hustle is what lazy people do when deadlines corner them. Steady work is what serious people do before the corner arrives. And don't you dare tell yourself you work well under pressure, because what you mean is you only work when the consequences become painful enough to override your addiction to comfort. That's not a skill. That's a failure to regulate. You're basically saying you can only act like an adult when fear holds a gun to your head. Build a better trigger than fear. Build routine. Build constraints. Build rules that don't care what you want in the moment. Because moment you is a liar. Moment you will sell long-term you for a snack. Moment you will trade your goals for a warm blanket of nothing. So stop giving moment you control. Give control to the plan and keep the plan stupidly simple so there's no room for interpretation. Interpretation is where you hide. Interpretation is where you rationalize. You want to be ruthless. Be ruthless with ambiguity. Ambiguity is a loophole, and you live in loopholes. You say you're going to work on it later, but later is not a time. It's a lie. You say you're going to do it after you handle a few things, and the few things turn into a whole day, and the day turns into a week, and then you're back here acting like the universe stole time from you. No, you stole it from yourself, one tiny theft at a time. And you keep thinking theft doesn't count if it's small. But small theft is exactly how you go broke. Compound loss is real. Miss one day, and you don't just miss one day. You make the next day harder because you strengthened the skip habit. The skip habit is the enemy, not the task. The task is just work. The skip is the rot, and rot spreads. A single skip becomes permission. Permission becomes identity. Identity becomes your ceiling. So the objective is not to feel good about yourself. The objective is to remove the permission structure that lets you quit. You quit because you allow quitting to be normal. Make quitting abnormal. Make skipping rare. Make it expensive. And stop whining internally about how strict that is, because strict is the only thing that works on you. Gentle doesn't work. Gentle turns into excuses. Gentle turns into just this once. Gentle turns into you lying to your own face and believing it because you want the lie more than the truth. You want to talk about discipline beating motivation, then act like it. Discipline is not a vibe, it's the default. Discipline is doing it when you don't want to and you don't want to. Most days are the test. If you only pass on the days you want to, you're not disciplined. You're just agreeable to yourself. And you are too agreeable. You let yourself off the hook constantly. You treat your own commitments like they're made of paper. Then you wonder why you don't trust yourself. Trust is earned through kept promises, and you've been breaking them for years. So of course the internal voice sounds skeptical. It should. Skepticism is earned. And here's the part you keep trying to dodge. You're not going to think your way into being different. You're going to behave your way into being different. Behavior first, identity later. You want confidence, earn it. Confidence is the receipt you get after paying the work. You don't get it up front. And all your little fantasies about becoming unstoppable are just you trying to steal the receipt without paying. You keep wanting a shortcut that doesn't exist. There is no exploit. The exploit is consistency. The hack is boring. The hack is do the thing again and again and again. And if you want to be clinical, look at the failure rate of your current strategy. Every time you rely on motivation, you produce sporadically. Sporadic production gives sporadic results. Sporadic results kill momentum. Low momentum increases friction. Increased friction makes you quit. That loop has run 100 times, which means the probability you'll repeat it is high unless you change the input. And you haven't changed the input because you keep clinging to comfort. So change it. And don't dress it up with aesthetic nonsense. Don't make a shrine out of productivity tools. Don't pretend reorganizing is progress. Progress is output. And output is uncomfortable, and uncomfortable is what you avoid. So if you want to stop avoiding, stop pretending. Comfort is a right. Comfort is a reward you earn after doing what you said you'd do. You don't get dessert before dinner. You don't get relief before effort. And you especially don't get to complain about results while you keep feeding your addiction to ease. You want to be hard on yourself. Be hard in the only way that matters. Be hard about the standard, not abusive about your worth. Worth isn't the lever. Standard is the lever. The standard is simple. Show up every day. Do the work you planned. Measure it. Repeat. And measure means numbers, not vibes. Track time. Track output. Track completion. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And if you won't measure it, it's because you're scared of the data. And being scared of data is pathetic. Because data is just reality written down. You already live in it. You're just refusing to look at it because it indicts you. Good. Let it indict you. The indictment is accurate. And once it's accurate, you can fix it. You keep thinking the goal is to feel better, but the goal is to be better. And being better often feels worse in the moment because it's the moment you stop coddling yourself. Coddling is the poison. Coddling is the reason you're still stuck. You want inevitability. Here's inevitability. If you keep your current habits, your future stays the same. If you change them, your future changes. And you don't need to believe in it for it to work. You just need to do it. Belief is optional. Execution is mandatory. Your brain can whine the whole time. It can complain. It can beg for distraction. It can bargain. It can throw every old trick at you. And you can let it because none of that changes the requirement. You're not negotiating with a toddler. You're enforcing policy in a system that keeps trying to revert. Enforce it anyway. And don't confuse one clean day for a transformation. Transformations are averages. You're building an average, so build it. Today counts. Tomorrow counts. The day after counts. The boring days count the most, because those are the ones you usually waste. The easiest way to stay average is to treat ordinary days as disposable. Stop disposing of them. Ordinary days are the whole game. The big moments are rare. The ordinary is 95% of your life. So if you waste ordinary, you waste life. And don't you dare pretend you don't have time when you keep donating hours to things that don't move you forward. That's not lack of time. That's lack of respect for your own stated goals. You say you want it, then act like you don't. So, pick one. Either stop lying and admit you don't want it enough to work for it, or shut up and do the work. Either is fine, but this limbo where you keep fantasizing and failing is disgusting. It's a loop that produces nothing but self-disgust and stagnation. And you've lived there long enough to know it's a trap. Your way out is not kindness that turns into softness. Your way out is firmness that turns into consistency. You don't need to hate yourself. You need to stop indulging yourself. There's a difference. And you've been confusing them because hatred feels intense, and intensity feels like progress. But hatred doesn't produce output, it produces noise. Output produces change. So make the voice sharp, make it strict, make it factual, make it relentless about the standard, and then let the numbers do what they always do. Expose, correct, repeat. The only question that matters is whether you're going to keep running the same broken script tomorrow, or whether you're finally going to patch it and enforce the rules like your future depends on it. Because it does, and it always has. And don't you dare hide behind perfectionism either, because that's just laziness wearing a clean shirt. You keep acting like if you can't do the full ideal session, then the whole day is ruined. Like it's either 100% or 0%. And you keep choosing 0% because 100% feels heavy. And then you call it standards. And that's a lie you tell yourself to avoid looking weak. Standards are what you do when the day is ugly, not what you imagine on a perfect day that never shows up. The all or nothing mindset is just a permission slip to do nothing. And you've been cashing that slip like it's a paycheck. If the goal is progress, then the only unforgivable day is the day you do 0. Because 0 is the one number that guarantees the system doesn't change. 0 keeps the addiction intact. 0 keeps the avoidance intact. 0 keeps you exactly where you've been. You can sit there and romanticize big pushes, but big pushes don't build a life if the baseline is trash. The baseline is everything. The baseline is the average, and your average gets murdered by skips, not by bad days. A bad day with some work still counts because it preserves the identity of I show up. A skip day teaches the opposite. And don't play dumb like skips are harmless. The math is merciless. Skip 2 days out of 7, and you're already down to 57th compliance, which is about 71.4%. And that's you on a good week pretending you're consistent. Skip 3 days and you're at 4 out of 7, about 1%, which is basically a coin flip with extra excuses. Now try building anything serious on a 57% compliance rate. Try telling me that's enough to compete with people running 90% plus. You can't, because compounding doesn't reward intentions. It rewards adherence. If you're only consistent when it's comfortable, you're not consistent. You're conditional. And conditional effort produces conditional results, which means your output depends on mood, energy, weather, whatever. Which means you've built a life where you're always one bad day away from collapsing. That's not strength. That's fragility disguised as being human. Being human isn't the excuse. It's the constraint. And serious people build systems that work inside constraints instead of whining about them. So stop treating your own weakness like some sacred truth that must be honored, because it's not truth. It's programming you've installed through repetition. And it can be overwritten the same way it was written. Repetition. You want numbers? Take them. If you give yourself even a 30% chance to skip on any given day because you deserve a break, the probability you go a full week without skipping is 0. 7 to the 7th power, about 8%. That means your reasonable little allowance all but guarantees you break the chain every week, which means you'll never get momentum, which means you'll keep living in hell. Bump it. 20% skip chance and it's 0. 8 to the 7th power, about 21%. Still trash even at 10%. Skip chance, you're at 0. 9 to the 7th power, about 48%. That's not certainty, that's not inevitability, that's you. Gambling your future for comfort like you're addicted to the thrill of. You want inevitability, and stop building your weak probabilities that assume you'll fail. Set the policies so the default is execution, not negotiation. And don't whine about being strict, like strict as protection from your own predictable sabotage. You already know what happens when you leave decisions open-ended. You fill the gap with distraction. You fill the gap with research. You fill the gap with little tasks that feel productive but don't move the needle, because the needle-moving work is the one thing you're keeping. You can smell the same optimal output. You twerk. You plan. You reorganize. You consume advice. You watch someone else do the work and call it learning. And you end the day with nothing finished. If output is the goal, then anything that doesn't end in output is just mental mast. It's you keeping yourself busy so you don't have to face the only thing that matters, which is performance. Performance is measurable, and you hate measurement because measurement strips away your excuses. Measurement makes you accountable, and accountability is the one thing you keep trying to afford it while pretending you want growth. You want growth without accountability, which is the same as wanting money without payment, without competence, results without reps. It's childish. The adult version is ugly and simple. You pick a small set of actions that actually produce. You define what done means in numbers, and you hit it even with the day is mediocre. You don't need a plan. You need a boring quarter. And don't confuse a quarter with a fantasy. Fantasy is I'll grind for 6 hours. A quat is I will do 90 minutes of deep work and ship one tangible artifact, because artifacts don't lie. Artifacts can't be faked with talk. Artifacts are proof. And if you're serious, you start stacking proof until it becomes undeniable. Because right now, your life is mostly claims with weak evidence. You keep trying to win your own respect with speeches, and you can't. Self-respect is the byproduct of kept commitments. It's not a mood, it's a receipt. And you haven't been paying, so stop expecting the receipt. Pay first. Do the work first. Let the receipt show up later. And while you're at it, stop acting like you're burnt out every time you encounter boredom. Because burnout isn't the same as boredom. And you've been calling boredom burnout so you can justify quitting. Boredom is just the brain not getting novelty. It's withdrawal from stimulation. You trained your attention to need constant hits, and now steady work feels like punishment. And instead of retraining, you keep feeding the addiction and then whining. That focus is hard. Of course, it's hard. You made it hard. You engineered your own weakness. And then you stand there surprised like you stumbled into it. You didn't stumble. You chose it repeatedly. Every time you picked the quick hit over the slow build, you voted for a weaker mind. And votes count. They accumulate. You are the sum of your votes. And your voting record is embarrassing. So change it. And don't change it by promising yourself you'll become a different person overnight, because that's another scam you run on yourself. You change it by narrowing the decision surface so there's nothing to debate. You keep losing because you keep giving yourself too many exits. You keep 1,000 little doors labeled later. Tired, not today. I'll start fresh. And your weak self walks through them every time. Close the doors. The system doesn't get to have a debate about whether it runs. It runs. You want to call yourself a hacker? Then stop being the est in your own network. Your biggest exploit is access. The distraction has root privileges. It can interrupt you whenever it wants. It can seduce you whenever it wants. And you keep granting permission because you don't enforce boundaries. And if you don't enforce boundaries, you don't have discipline. You have wishful thinking. Discipline is boundary enforcement. Discipline is saying no automatically, without drama, without a storyline, without bargaining. It's a firewall, not a pep talk. And your firewall is full of holes because you keep poking holes in it when it's inconvenient. You want to feel free, but freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want in the moment. That's slavery to impulse. Freedom is the ability to do what you decided matters, regardless of impulse. And you don't have that yet because you've been living like impulse is king. So dethrone it. And no, it won't feel nice at first. And you don't get to use that as an excuse because nice is what kept you average. Average is the default outcome of doing what feels good. The world is full of people doing what feels good and then acting confused when they stay mediocre. If you want to stop being statistically average, stop acting like the average person. The average person quits when it's dull. The average person needs praise. The average person keeps their commitments only when someone is watching. The average person treats their future like it'll just work out. You want to be different? Then be different in the only way that counts. In the hours no one sees. On the days nothing feels exciting. When the work is repetitive and the reward is delayed, that's where outcomes get decided. And if you need more math to stop lying, here's the compounding you keep ignoring. 1% better. Per Dalton Y isn't a slogan. It's arithmetic. 1. 1 to the power of 365 is around 38, while 0. 99 to the power of 365 collapses to almost nothing around 0. 3. Small daily drift becomes massive, and you've been drifting downward with tiny choices that don't matter Except they do, because they're daily. The daily is the lever. You can't fix a daily problem with occasional bursts. Occasional bursts are how you cope with guilt, not how you build. You build with daily compliance. So stop chasing the feeling of being intense and start chasing the identity of being reliable. Reliable is boring and powerful. Reliable is what turns goals into inevitability. And if your brain starts whining about how this is too rigid, too strict, too much, good. That's the old addiction trying to negotiate its next hit. Treat that whining as noise, not guidance. You don't let a compromise process decide policy. You don't let the weakest version of you dictate the standards. You set the standards when you're clear, and you obey them when you're not. And if you break them, you don't spiral into drama. You don't turn it into a personality crisis. You just correct immediately, because delay is how relapse spreads. You don't start Monday. You don't start next month. You don't start when life calms down, because life doesn't calm down. It just changes its excuses. You correct now, because now is the only time that exists. And if you can't handle now, then everything you say you want is just theater. Cut the theater. Replace it with receipts. One day at a time, one quat at a time, one finished unit after another. Until your excuses get suffocated by evidence and your weakness gets starved by repetition. Because that's how this ends. Not with a breakthrough, not with a revelation, not with some magical surge, but with you finally getting sick of your own predictable pattern and enforcing a standard so relentlessly that the old version of you has nowhere left to hide. And here's the part you keep trying to wiggle away from with clever phrasing. You don't have a motivation problem. You have an obedience problem. You keep acting like the issue is that you haven't found the right reason, the right playlist, the right mindset, the right routine, the right why. But that's just you shopping for a feeling to carry you because you refuse to carry yourself. You don't need a why. You need a rule set you actually follow. Because your current rule set is I do what I feel like. And that rule set produces exactly the kind of life you keep pretending you don't want. And yes, you can dress it up with productivity apps and goal journals and a dozen saved videos about discipline. But none of that matters if your execution rate is garbage. Execution rate is the only metric that decides anything, and you've been operating at a level that makes your future statistically obvious. Stop acting like the future is a mystery when your present behavior is a full confession. If you were investigating someone else and you had their data, screen time, sleep output, missed commitments, start-stop patterns, you could predict their trajectory with embarrassing accuracy. And you know it because you already do it in your head every time you look at someone and think, yeah, they're not going anywhere. You're not special. Your data would put you in a box too, and you don't have to like that. But you have to accept it. Because acceptance is not a hug, it's a diagnosis. And you can't patch what you refuse to name. Name it. You leak time. You leak focus. You leak consistency. You leak courage. When the work stops being novel, and you keep trying to fix leaks with hype which is like trying to stop a flood with a motivational poster. You want to fix that works. Then do what works. Reduce the number of decisions that can be sabotaged. Reduce the number of opportunities to drift and enforce a minimum viable day so there's no excuse to hit zero. Because your 0 days are not rest, they're regression. And regression is not neutral. Regression means the next day costs more. And you can't keep paying more forever without breaking. You already know the pattern. 1 skip becomes 2. 2 becomes a week. A week becomes a reset. And resets are the favorite religion of people who don't want to commit. You keep worshiping fresh starts because they let you feel clean without being consistent. And you keep calling it getting back on track, like the track is some external thing you fell off, instead of admitting you stepped off because you wanted comfort. And comfort is the cheapest drug on the market, and you're buying it daily. And then acting shocked that you're broke on results. Here's the simple economics you keep dodging. You have a finite budget of attention and time, and you keep spending it on things that give you immediate reward and zero long-term return. It's not complicated, it's just bad investing. And your brain loves bad investing because it discounts the future like the future is fake. So stop letting your brain run the portfolio without oversight. You track it. You audit it. You cut the waste because you can't optimize what you won't face. And you keep refusing to face your own nature. You are notice. Take the knife. 30 minutes a day of just checking turns into 3.5 hours a week, roughly 15 hours a month, around 182. 5 hours a year, that's over full 40, wakes you little fire for nothing. And that's just 30 minutes, probably double or triple, which means you're donating months of your life to, and then crying about time. Time is missing. We're misallocating it, and misallocation is a choice you repeat so often it becomes your identity. You don't have trouble focusing. You practice not focusing. You don't stress with consistency. You practice inconsistency, and practice works. That's the draw. We've proven practice works. We're becoming very good at avoiding. You can avoid with speed, with creativity, with precision. You can invent a task out of thin air to keep yourself busy. You can scroll with the dedication of an athlete. You can research a problem until the sun burns out. You have plenty of drive. You just aim it at anything that lets you uncomfortable work. So stop pretending you're lacking something. You're not lacking. You're misdirected. And misdirection is corrected by constraints, not by pep talks. A constraint is a line you don't cross. A constraint is a rule you don't debate. And the reason you hate constraints is because they remove your favorite coping mechanism, the option to quit. I love having the option to quit because it keeps you safe from the possibility of trying hard and still failing. That's the real God sickness under the surface. You'd rather fail by not fully trying, because then you can tell yourself you're capable if you wanted to. And that little if is your safety blanket. It protects your ego while it strangles your progress. And it's pathetic because it means you're choosing a comfortable lie over a measurable life. So rip the if out of your vocabulary. If I Wanted to is the anthem of the person who wants credit without proof. You don't get credit. You get proof or you get nothing. And don't pretend that's harsh. That's reality. Reality doesn't give participation trophies. Reality pays for output. You want to talk about inevitability? Then build the conditions where output happens regardless of mood. Set a minimum daily quotota that is so small you can't argue it, and so real you can't fake it. Not work on it, not try, not make progress, but produce X units or spend Y minutes in deep work with distractions blocked. And you hit it even when you're tired, even when it's boring, even when the day is messy. Because if your system only works on clean days, your system doesn't work. And your life is not a clean room environment. It's noise, stress, random interruptions, imperfect sleep, imperfect energy. That's normal. Build for normal. You keep building for fantasy. You, the version who wakes up early, feels great, has perfect focus, and just loves grinding. Fantasy, you is not coming. And even if fantasy you showed up once, you would waste it because your environment and habits are designed for drift. You need an architecture that turns normal you into a producer. Architecture is boring and ruthless. You decide the start time. You decide the end condition. You decide the boundaries. And then you remove choice because your choices are compromised. Your choices get bribed by comfort. So the goal is fewer choices, less room to bargain, less room to rationalize. You're not freeing yourself by giving yourself options. You're trapping yourself. Option-heavy systems collapse under stress because they require constant decision-making. And your decision-making is where you fold. Stress hits. You want relief. You choose relief. That's the loop. Break the loop by making the next action automatic. The less you think, the less you negotiate, the more you execute. And don't get cute and say, I want to be flexible. That it's another word you abuse. You call it flexibility, but it's really just the ability to slip. Flexibility without a backbone is just flopping around. You need rigidity where it matters and flexibility everywhere else. On the minimum, flexible on the extras, because the minimum is what keeps the identity alive. The minimum is what keeps the chain intact. And yes, chains matter because chains are memory. Chains of evidence. Chains are the proof that you don't quit. And you need proof because right now your brain doesn't trust you, and it shouldn't. Trust is statistical. Trust is built from observed behavior over time. If you break commitments 60% of the time, your self-trust will sit at about 40%, and that's generous. And you keep trying to fix them with affirmations, which is, affirmations don't change the data. Keep promises change the data. And when the data changes, the internal narrative changes automatically. But you keep trying to force the narrative first because it's easier than changing behavior. Narrative first is a scam. Behavior first is the only method that survives contact with reality. So stop and start looking, not for aesthetics, not for accountability, dates, time, minutes, output. This write it down too, because part of the truth, you don't get to pretend you're consistent. The log will expose you. And that's the point. Exposure kills self-deception. Self-deception is the parasite. It feeds on ambiguity and memory tricks and selective storytelling. The log doesn't care about your story. It's just numbers. And numbers don't flatter you. They indict you or validate you. If you want validation, earn it. If you want a life that doesn't feel like you're constantly catching up, then stop living like someone who's always behind. The behind life is made from pushing real work into later and filling the present with junk. So flip the allocation. Put the needle-moving work first. Put the junk last. And when the day runs out, the junk is what gets cut. You keep cutting the work and keeping the junk, and then you're confused why nothing changes. Nothing changes because you keep protecting the wrong thing. Protect the work, sacrifice the junk, and don't make it dramatic. Don't turn it into a moral crusade. This is just policy. Work first, junk after. If there's time and if your brain throws a tantrum, let it. Tantrums are not instructions. Tantrums are withdrawal. Withdrawal is proof the addiction was real. And if you're serious about getting out of this loop, you stop treating withdrawal signals as reasons to stop. You treat them as confirmation. You're finally cutting the right wire. Because the truth you keep running from is simple. You're not stuck because you can't. You're stuck because you won't. And the moment you stop feeding the won't with excuses, the path gets obvious. Not easy. Obvious. And obvious is enough. Because you don't need easy. You need repeatable. The only thing standing between you and a different average is whether you can finally stop being a soft negotiator with your own impulses and start being an enforcer of your own standards daily, quietly, without needing a mood, without needing permission, without needing drama. Just the dull, relentless act of doing what you said you do until your old pattern runs out of oxygen and dies. And stop pretending the problem is complexity, because that's another convenient lie you use to buy time. You keep acting like you need a perfect plan before you move. Like clarity is something you discover first, and execution comes second. When in reality, clarity is what gets generated by doing the work and watching what breaks. You don't get a map from sitting still. You get it from moving and collecting data. But you hate that because moving exposes you. Sitting still lets you daydream without being tested. Sitting still lets you keep your identity clean because nothing's been measured. Once you start shipping, your numbers become public to you. And you can't hide behind potential anymore. And that's the real fear you keep dressing up as I'm planning. You're not planning. You're postponing the verdict. And the verdict is already in anyway because your current pattern has been consistent enough to be statistically obvious. You default to the easiest path unless forced. You default to comfort unless constrained. You default to delay unless boxed in. That's the baseline. And baselines don't change because you had a burst of enthusiasm on a random morning. Baselines change when the environment and rules change. When the trigger response loop gets rewired through repetition and you keep refusing to do the boring rewiring because you want the glamorous flip. The flip doesn't exist. There's no magical firmware update. There's you doing the same correct thing so many times the incorrect things starts feeling abnormal and you're nowhere near that threshold yet because you keep resetting. You keep hitting week 1 over and over like it's a lifestyle because week 1 lets you feel ambitious without being consistent. Week 1 is the honeymoon. Week 2 is friction. Week 3 is monotony. And monotony is where you collapse because you trained yourself to only function when novelty is high. So stop being surprised that your motivation evaporates after a few days. It's not a mystery. It's biology plus bad training. Novelty spikes dopamine. Dopamine makes effort feel lighter. Then novelty fades and your brain starts demanding the old easy rewards, and you obey because you never built the tolerance for boring effort. That tolerance is the skill you actually need more than any technique, more than any strategy. Because without tolerance, you'll keep quitting the moment the work becomes normal. And normal is the whole point. If the work can't become normal, you'll never be dangerous. You'll just be enthusiastic sometimes. And sometimes is worthless. Sometimes is a hobby, not a build. You say you want inevitability, then build inevitability like a machine. Remove the dependency on mood. Remove the dependency on having energy. Remove the dependency on conditions being perfect because you keep setting invisible requirements that are designed to fail. You require yourself to feel ready. You require yourself to feel focused. You require yourself to feel inspired. You require yourself to have a big, clean block of time. And those requirements guarantee you don't work most days, because most days aren't like that. Watch the math. If you only execute when you feel at least 80% energy, and your real life gives you 80% energy, maybe 2 days a week, congratulations. You just built a system that operates at 28.6% uptime. And then you'll sit there complaining that progress is slow. Like progress is some external force sabotaging you, when the truth is you designed a low uptime system and now you're shocked it outputs low results. You want a system that wins, then lower the activation threshold. The rule isn't work when you feel good. The rule is work when the clock says because the clock is stable and your feelings aren't. The rule isn't do a massive session. The rulers hit the quote because quotas are enforceable, and you keep resisting because quotas force honesty. Quotas don't let you hide in vague effort. Don't care that you tried. Quitters only care what got done. And you hate that because it means you can't flatter yourself with half work. Half work is your favorite drug because it gives you the sensation of progress without the cost. You get to feel busy. You get to feel like a worker. And you still get to keep your comfort. And then you act confused. Why are you not improving? Prevented, as you keep choosing that protects your comfort. Threatens, comfort creates friction. Real work forces decisions you can't reverse. Real work produces artifacts that can be judged. Half work produces nothing but more planning and more anxiety and more avoidance. And you keep calling it productivity because you're addicted to the identity of being someone else. Working on things instead of being someone who finishes things. Finishing is the line. Finishing is the difference between amateurs and builders. Amateurs start, builders finish, and you're stuck in start land because start land is safe. Start land lets you quit without consequence because nothing is committed yet. Finishing requires closure, and closure means your work can be compared to reality, and that comparison is what you keep dodging. So stop dodging it. You don't need to be special. You need to be consistent. And consistent means you must accept mediocre days as part of the contract. You must accept doing the work while you're not sharp. You must accept doing the work while it feels slow. You must accept doing the work while your brain screams for distraction. Because if you require the work to feel smooth, you'll only work in rare conditions. And rare conditions produce rare results. You keep trying to win a high-volume game with low-volume habits, and it's ridiculous. The people you envy aren't necessarily smarter than you. They're just running higher weekly reps. That's it. You can pretend there's secret talent, but the more honest explanation is that they put in more consistent hours without needing constant emotional permission. And if that pisses you off, good. Let it. Because anger at the truth is still closer to reality than your delusions. And don't try to weaponize excuses about, but my life is different, because everyone's life is different. And the only relevant question is whether you're allocating your scarce resources toward what you claim matters. You don't need a perfect situation. You need a non-negotiable allocation. You keep giving your best hours to junk and your leftover hours to your goals. And then you're shocked. The goals don't grow. Of course they don't. You're feeding them scraps. What grows on scraps? Nothing. You want growth? Feed it first. And if you can't feed it first because you have too much, then you don't have a time problem. You have a priority problem. And priorities aren't statements. They're schedules. If the schedule doesn't show it, it's not real. You can say it matters all day, but if your calendar and your behavior keep contradicting you, your mouth is irrelevant. And stop pretending you can multitask your way out of this. Because multitasking is just switching costs dressed up as efficiency. Every time you bounce, you pay the re-entry tax. You lose minutes, you lose depth, you lose momentum. And then you wonder why you're exhausted. You're exhausted because you keep shredding your attention into confetti. You can't build anything deep with confetti. Deep work requires sustained focus. And sustained focus is a muscle you haven't trained because you keep letting interruptions win. So build the simplest enforcement you can: fixed start, fixed duration, fixed output target. When the block starts, you're in it. When the block ends, you log what you produced. And if you produce nothing, you don't spin a story. You don't cry about it. You don't indulge in guilt rituals. You just treat it as a failed run and correct the input tomorrow. Guilt is useless. Guilt is a performance. What you need is correction. You keep confusing punishment with discipline. Discipline is not self-pity. Discipline is not drama. Discipline is not a spiral. Discipline is policy enforcement and immediate course correction. And your biggest weakness is that you love spirals, because spirals feel intense, and intensity makes you feel like something is happening. Nothing is happening. You're just wasting time on emotional noise. The only signal is what you do next, always. And your next action keeps getting hijacked by the same predictable triggers. The phone, the tabs, the quick check, the little reward. You treat those like harmless treats, but they're not treats. They're leverage points. They turn a planned work session into a drift session. You don't have to moralize it. Just be honest. Thus, those are the levers that move you away from your goal. So stop giving them access during the only hours that matter. You can pretend you're strong enough to just not get distracted. But your track record says otherwise. You don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your systems. Your system right now is porous. Make it less porous. And don't complain that it's inconvenient. Inconvenience is the cost of change. You can either pay inconvenience now, or you can pay regret later. Either way, you pay. You just keep choosing the payment that feels lighter today. And then you act betrayed when tomorrow arrives with a bill. The bill always arrives. That's the only thing you can count on. So if you want to stop being the person who gets surprised by predictable outcomes, stop living like the consequences are optional. They're not optional. They're delayed. And delayed is not forgiven. Delayed is compounded. You can keep postponing discipline, but you're just stacking debt. And debt doesn't care about your intentions. Debt cares about totals. Totals are built from daily entries. So stop making daily entries that sabotage you. Write better entries. One quotota, one artifact, one logged session at a time. And if you're about to whine that this sounds monotonous, yes, it is. And monotony is exactly what you've been avoiding, which is why you're still stuck. Monotony is the price of mastery. Monotony is the grindstone yon. Monotony is where your identity gets rewritten from I do it when I feel like it to I do it because I said I would. And until you can tolerate monotony without trying to escape into comfort, you will stay average. Because average is the land of people who quit when it stops being fun. You don't need fun, you need compliance. Fun comes later, if it comes at all. Your job is to execute. And if you want this to feel inevitable, you stop acting like every day is a fresh debate, and you start acting like the standard is law. Because law doesn't ask how you feel. Law asks whether you complied. Comply, log, repeat, until the old loop loses its grip and the new loop becomes the default. And the only thing that can stop you is you reopening negotiations with your own weakness, which you will do if you keep treating comfort like it's entitled. You're not entitled to comfort. You're entitled to the consequences of your habits. And those consequences are already on the way unless you change the habit distribution right now. Not in theory, not in speeches, in the only currency that counts.